Welcome to the Jackson Rudolph podcast. I am your host, Jackson Rudolph, and this is episode 13, a recap of the Compete Nationals and balancing two passions. And I'm going to elaborate on what I mean by balancing two passions here kind of as we get into it, but we're going to start with tournament talk today, diving right into the recap of the Compete Nationals. And I got to start this off by bragging on a couple of my competitive edge guys. So we're just going to go straight through some of the results here from the nighttime finals. Dawson Holt took his first career overall grand championship in weapons. And the first thing I want to say about this is, I told you so. If we rewind to like 2 or 3 episodes ago to my Warrior Cup recap, Dawson was on stage at Warrior Cup for traditional weapons, as well as his CMX open hand forms, wasn't able to secure an overall grand championship that night. However, he shows up to the Compete Nationals, he wins the runoff for the CMX weapons, and then he takes that to stage and he wins the overall grand with his CMX sword form, and securing his first overall grand championship. I said Dawson was going to be somebody to look out for this year, and that is certainly holding true through this second tournament, which is the Compete Nationals. Super proud of Dawson. He went out there, he put on a show, and he was fun to watch all weekend. So congratulations to Dawson Holt. Another competitive edge member that showed out this weekend was Kylie Boyer. Kylie Boyer secured her first career win on stage, and not only did she get her first career win on stage, she won double overall grands. So she decided that night that one wasn't enough, so she came back up there with her weapons form, and she won another one. And what's even more impressive was that in the first overall grand that she won on Saturday night, right as she was about to start her form, the lights and the music cut out. And it was weird because it's not like the power in the entire room went out, but it was like the power on one half of the room. And it just so happened to be the half of the room that had the Sport Martial Arts live stream going, as well as the music going, as well as half of the lighting for the stage. And so like the stage is, it cuts out, the live stream's down, so everybody at home doesn't know what's going on. But Kylie was a professional. She went out there, she kept going. There was a lot of crowd support given the technical difficulties that were happening. And Kylie was a true warrior and professional. She went out there and she hit a great form, and she was able to secure that first win. And then later on in the show, went on to secure another win with her weapons form as well. That's in the 14 to 17 girls category. So congratulations to Kylie Boyer. And I could spend an entire 3 episodes of this podcast talking about how proud I am of the Competitive Edge team members. I try not to name drop too often because then I feel like I got to try to name drop all of them, and then I feel horrible if I forget somebody. But Competitive Edge showed out in general throughout the weekend. Chris Conover got a win in an Extreme Forms division, made it to runoffs. Ben Jones ran an excellent form in runoffs. Brady Clifford had some excellent forms in runoffs. Avery Presley had some strong performances this weekend, but she's dealing with an injury. And I know that there's people that I'm forgetting. PJ Clark, he's moving up into a new age division, and he's trying to overcome that hurdle. And the biggest thing across all the members of the team is just how hard they're working right now, and how proud I am of everybody trying to prove themselves, trying to show that it's their time. And that's something that I'm super proud of across the board for any of my team members with Competitive Edge. And I say my team members, it's a team that I coach alongside Reed and Cole Presley. Reed and I started Competitive Edge teaching seminars years ago, and then as Cole got more and more involved in competitions, we brought him in as well. Mackenzie Emery's been involved too, and we're just so proud of that team and how hard they work. And now moving on down the list of the recap for Compete Nationals, Jake Presley, instead of winning the weapons overall grand like he normally does this time he took home the forms overall grand championship with his extreme performance, which he did a beautiful job of. Lots of power, lots of speed, just like in his bow form, but this time with the open hand. Had a double full towards the end of the form, which is extremely difficult to do. A lot of competitors get gassed by that point, but Jake did an excellent job of showing that perseverance and finding a way to win. You know, he had a stumble in the CMX weapons runoff, but he shook that off, and that didn't matter, and he went on and won the CMX forms runoff and was able to take that all the way to an overall grand championship. Jake and I were also able to win the Sync weapons grand championship alongside each other, so that's always a good time. It's also fun when we get to go up there and just do a demonstration on stage, not having to worry about competing on stage. But sometimes when we win Sync, we get to just go up there and have a good time performing and putting on a show for the crowd, and Jake and I had a lot of fun doing that. So now we're moving on to some of the fighting results. Drew Beatty was the women's fighting winner, so congratulations to Drew of Team K-Talk. A new K-Talk member was the men's heavyweight winner. We have Pablo Moreno. Pablo is actually a student, or I don't know if students the right word. I don't know if they train privately, but I know that Ross has been a mentor for Pablo for some time. So Ross Levine, the guest that we had on the show last week, he's very closely involved with Pablo. So I know that he was proud to see Pablo Moreno taking a win in the men's heavyweight. And then there was Jack Felton taking the overall grand championship win in the lightweight category. And that doesn't surprise anybody. I mean, Jack Felton's been one of the best lightweights in the world for as long as I've been involved in sport karate. Jack Felton's been at that level. You know what I mean? And he's a guy that, with Irish Open coming up next week, it seems like Jack Felton is always in that Irish Open Final Four. And that's one thing that I'll be looking to see if he can break through and win that Irish Open weight. Obviously, I'm going to be pulling for my Paul Mitchell guys and my Paul Mitchell brothers that are representing Karali while we're in Ireland. Alex Mancias is going to be going out there to compete, our newest pickup. So absolutely, I'm pulling for them, and I want to see our Paul Mitchell guys win. But there are a few fighters that they know that if it can't be a Paul Mitchell guy that time, that I'm okay with them winning. Jack's one of those guys. I got a lot of respect for Jack. He's a great fighter. He does an awesome job, consummate professional. And I'm looking forward to seeing him fight in Ireland as well. But I'll always prefer for a Paul Mitchell guy to win. Moving on. Now we are going to talk about the men's CMX Forms overall grand championship. Jacob Pinto came out of retirement to come back and win the men's CMX Forms overall grand championship. But that was not without a very strong showing by Aiden Considine. Aiden Considine was competing against him for that overall grand championship. And I thought Aiden threw down a great form. That's a situation where it was a Danny and Aiden showdown for the Warrior Cup, and Danny had the edge that night, but I thought Aiden looked really strong. This weekend at Compete Nationals, it happened to be Aiden versus Jacob, so a different matchup with Aiden once again showing up and having a strong showing, but then it just wasn't his night to go ahead and take home the win. So one thing that I am extremely proud of as his teammate is Aiden Considine going out there, being consistent, putting down great forms, good strong forms, and I thought that he looked really good this weekend on the form side. Now moving on into men's CMX weapons. I was very fortunate and blessed to be able to go ahead and repeat what I did at the AKA Warrior Cup and win the CMX weapons title there. So very blessed and humbled by that. And that's enough of that. Yeah, I won CMX weapons. So that's the end of our results for the Compete Nationals. Overall, Shian Muhammad Jahanvash does a great job of putting on an awesome event. It's always well run. I've been coming to Compete Nationals. Compete Nationals is actually where I won my first overall grand championship back in 2010. I think I've probably been coming to the Compete Nationals since 2008 or 2009 maybe. And so it's awesome to be able to keep coming every year. And Muhammad always puts on a great event. So a lot of respect to the Jahanvash family for putting on a great event there. And now as we go ahead and shift over into the second topic for today, we interrupt this message to give you an advertisement from the Flow System. The Flow System is a one-of-a-kind weapons training program featuring dynamic forms and, most importantly, instructor training. So if you're an instructor that's not super confident in your weapons ability, don't think that you know how to do some of these crazy throws that you're seeing being done in competition, all these crazy tricks for bow staff or commas, have no fear, because the Flow System is here. The Flow System is designed to teach instructors, school owners, teaching staff, black belts. It's designed to be able to teach you not only how to do those skills, but also the most effective ways to teach those skills to your students. Go ahead and check out theflowsystem.tv today for more information. And speaking of the Flow System, I had a brief conversation with Will Jackson. Will Jackson is a Flow System school owner, and he is the coach of Team Freestyle, who happened to be the team demonstration champions at the Compete Nationals, based out of San Diego. And they do an incredible job. Mr. Jackson does an incredible job with choreography. He always has a squad going out. They're always in sync. They're always very well choreographed with the music. And Team Freestyle just does a really good job. So hats off to them, even though Competitive Edge competes against them in demo. Much respect to Team Freestyle for the demos that they're able to put together and how impressive those are. But I had a brief conversation with him, and one thing, he mentioned that he listens to the podcast, which I appreciate very much. And by the way, anybody that listens to the podcast, if you see me in person at a tournament, seminar, whatever, let me know. I love to hear it when people tell me they listen to the podcast and what they think. And that's exactly what Will Jackson did. And he told me, one of these days you need to do a podcast about how do you balance all the stuff that you do. And primarily, going to school, being at Stanford, and trying to, go to medical school and ultimately be a surgeon one day, and balancing that with being a top sport karate competitor. And so I wanted to do two things to address this. The number one thing is, part of the title of this particular episode is balancing two passions. And a lot of motivational speakers, your Tony Robbins of the world, will tell you about how you have to find your one passion, right? You seek out this passion, and once you find that passion and you discover that that's what you're passionate about, you don't stop at anything to be able to achieve that goal and live out that passion. But very rarely do people ever account for the fact that you can have two passions. And I think that that's perfectly okay, because it's the life that I live right now. But the important thing to remember about having two passions is that it's often very demanding upon your schedule, and you have to be truly invested in both of those passions to be able to make it work. If you don't put your entire heart and soul into both of those passions and spend all your time focusing on those two things, it doesn't work, because that's what passion takes. It takes all of your time being dedicated there. So if you do have two passions, which I feel like many people do, I feel like many people reach a crossroads in their life where they're like, I love this one thing and I love this other thing too, but in order to make a living or provide for my family or to live out my dreams or whatever the case may be, there's this fork in the road mentality where it's like you have to pick one. Whereas in my opinion, I've always felt that you can dabble on both sides. You know what I mean? You can go down one road and take an exit and focus on the other sometimes to ruin that metaphor a little bit. But in all seriousness, I think that the best way for me to articulate this was just to take you through a day in my life. What is it that I do that allows me to balance on a day-to-day basis my career as a sport karate athlete, a representative of Team Paul Mitchell, a curriculum developer for the Flow system, a private lesson instructor, a coach of many students on the circuit, a coach of Competitive Edge, obligations that I have at Stanford, working in a research lab. All of those, and those are just a few of the different hats that I wear. I could go on. There's probably 3 or 4 other roles that I have that I could tell you guys about. But how does all that get balanced? So I'm going to walk you through what I'm going to be doing today on Monday. This is a typical Monday for me. A typical Monday, wake up at about 8 a.m. Normally during the week of a tournament, so leading up to Compete Nationals, I wake up and I go to the gym and I do cardio, trying to get my body in the best shape possible to be ready for the competition coming up that weekend. For bigger tournaments, I'll do that a little bit more in advance. Start doing that cardio maybe a month in advance of the U.S. Open, a month in advance of Diamond Nationals, things like that. And really, I try to do it as often as I can whenever my schedule allows. But just general tournament week, Monday is definitely, or every day of the week, but Monday in particular, waking up 8 a.m., going to the gym, doing cardio first, and then getting a shower, getting ready for class. This is when I respond to most of my emails. So this is emails regarding the flow system stuff, whether there's technical difficulties or people have questions, that type of thing. Emails about private lessons, people trying to renew their private lessons with me or trying to book new private lessons, getting private lessons scheduled for upcoming tournaments that I'm going to be at, responding to emails for Stanford obligations, like when I need to show up to a lab meeting for my research work or assignments that I have due later that day or deadlines later in the week that I to keep on my mind. That's when I kind of go through all my emails and do all that. It's kind of in that 8 a.m. while I'm doing my cardio on the walk from the gym back home and vice versa. That's what I kind of do for that first hour and a half of my day. 9:30 a.m. I have Spanish class, primarily because it's a graduation requirement to learn a language for a year at Stanford. But I also genuinely, part of the reason that I picked Spanish instead of taking one of the classes that at Stanford is known to be an easier class. I could have taken an American Sign Language class, which although very valuable is known to be an easier class. But I specifically wanted to take Spanish because of what I could use it for, and that's two-pronged. First of all, from my previous experience teaching seminars in Guatemala, when I am, and just at Compete Nationals, I was teaching a student that actually came from Guatemala to the Compete Nationals. And so, being able to speak a little bit of Spanish was extremely helpful because he didn't speak much English, I didn't speak much Spanish, but we were able to communicate in this kind of Spanglish that allowed the lesson to flow much more smoothly. And I thought about how cool it would be if I could get to a level of proficiency and a level of fluency where I could actually teach full private lessons, full seminars in Spanish, and be able to broaden my audience in that sense. And I think that that would be something really cool, as well as just working in the medical field. You know, you're going to have patients that come in and that don't speak much English. And in the United States, a lot of the people that don't speak much English are probably going to be Spanish speakers. And so I want to be able to effectively communicate with them to be able to provide the best possible care. And, you know, the hospitals do have translators and things like that, but I strongly believe in the fact that medicine is an art, right? And part of that art is not only the execution of the medicine and the treating of the patient, but your interaction with that patient, making sure that the patient has an intimate understanding of what is going on with their body and what's going on with their treatment. And I feel like that is... tainted is too strong of a word, but I feel like there's an extra barrier there between the physician and the patient if you're having to work through a translator. I would much rather be able to speak to my patient directly, and so learning Spanish may be something that helps me with that in the future. So anyway, 9:30 a.m. to 10:30 a.m. is Spanish class. Then I'm off to a microbial physiology class, which is part of my major, learning about the way that different microbes do metabolism, things like that. It's important for understanding antibiotic resistance, things like that I'm going to need in medical school. That class ends at 11:30. Then at 11:30, this is where I do a lot of my administrative work and homework over lunch. So at this point, I'll go through emails, and then I also go through Facebook messages. So a lot of my business, I check the emails early in the morning. I typically have more emails, responses to the morning emails around 11:30. So I check those out. 11:30 is also when I go through all my Facebook messages. And my Facebook messages are typically students asking questions about their private lessons later in the week. People asking me for certain tips on certain things, people asking me really anything under the sun. I'd say that I get anywhere between 10 and 20 Facebook messages a day of just random stuff to work through and deal with. And so that's what I do around that time, over lunch, doing that, catching up on whatever homework has to be done, maybe for classes later in the day, that type of thing. And then at 1 o'clock, I go ahead and I start teaching private lessons. So at 1 o'clock, I teach about 2.5 hours worth of private lessons on a daily basis via Skype. My private lessons are half-hour sessions, so I'm seeing 3, 4, 5 students in that time period, depending on the week, depending on the day, how much demand there is at that time. If we're right up close to a tournament, I'm typically going to have a full schedule of lessons, that type of thing. And then at 3:30, I have a 2-hour poetry class, which I use as a little bit of my meditation because I enjoy poetry. I enjoy writing it. I enjoy listening to it. I'm very much a consumer of literature. I love reading books, and poetry is another one of my side passions, my pseudo passions, if you will, that I don't seriously pursue, but I enjoy it when I have a chance to. But the poetry class is primarily a graduation requirement as well. So as a senior at Stanford, I find myself doing a whole lot of the things. They're like, hey, you got to do this before you graduate. I'm like, okay, well, guess I'm taking a 2-hour poetry class. So that gets out at 5:30 p.m., at which point I go back to my dorm for more Skype private lessons. So that'll be about an hour and a half of Skype private lessons at that point. So on a given day, it's possible that I could be seeing, 6 to 8 Skype students on a given day. And that's the level of care that I have for my students. I want to make sure that they're getting to train with me as much as they want to try to take their skills to the next level. So very rarely do I ever try to cut down on the amount of time that I'm teaching, because I love teaching and I know how valuable it is to the students that are receiving that instruction as well. So around 5:30 to 7, I'd say, is more Skype private lessons. And then at 7 p.m. on Mondays, I have a Spanish makeup class that I have to go to in the evenings. And this is a makeup class that's designed for student athletes that have to do university-related travel, things like that. But because I'm a professional athlete, obviously what I do isn't related to Stanford. But the Spanish department was understanding in that my situation was a little bit unique, so they allow me to attend those makeup classes, because at Stanford, if you're in a language class, it's required attendance. You have to be there at every class, otherwise it'll impact your grade. So like for Irish Open, I'm going to be missing a Thursday, Friday, and a Monday for the Irish Open. Missing those 3 classes could have taken my grade down a letter grade that I didn't deserve to lose, you know what I mean? So I have to go to those Spanish makeup classes to be sure that I'm keeping my grades up in that class. And then that's over by about 7:50. And then I go home at that point, go to the dining hall, grab some dinner, work on homework. So that's around 8 p.m. Eating dinner, working on homework often at the same time, writing papers, working on problem sets, things like that. That normally takes about 2 hours if it's, a finals week or something like that. Obviously, that becomes a little bit more intense. But that's, on a good night, that'll be 1 hour. But most nights, that's about 2 hours. And so at 9 or 10 p.m., that's when I go and I train. The gym's open till midnight, so I try to finish up my homework as quickly as possible and then try to get in the gym by 9 or 10 p.m. To be training and trying to prepare myself for that next event, brainstorming new moves, trying to put together new combinations, always trying to change the game, always trying to take my game to the next level. And so at that point, I typically stay there and until the gym closes at around midnight. Then I go back to my dorm, get showered, finally get settled down by about 12:30 or so. At that point, if I still have some homework or some studying to do, because I've just trained, so even though I'm tired, I'm not ready for sleep yet. So I'll spend maybe half an hour or so going over notes, reviewing, going over lab procedures for the next day in the research lab, something like that. And that's what I do till about 1 in the morning. And then sometime between 1 and 2 in the morning, that's when I fall asleep. And then I wake up and do it all again the next day. So that is a typical day in the life of what I do. So it's busy, but the most important thing about it is, as busy as that sounds, and as much as I'm running around and doing this, doing that, not having time for myself, not having time for my friends or family, even stuff like that, I remember two things. The first thing that I remember is that every second of what I'm doing, I love what I'm doing. Right. If you notice, like as I was breaking down that day, there was a reason for every single thing that I did that day. And I genuinely enjoy every single step of that day. I enjoy everything that I'm doing. I'm passionate about what I'm doing, whether it's taking the steps to become a neurosurgeon or whether it's continuing to work on my martial arts career, whether that's inspiring students or making myself a better practitioner so that I can go out there and continue to compete at a high level. Those are the things that I love most in this world. And as my dad always told me, and I've said it on the podcast before, if you love what you do, you'll never work a day in your life. And so even though I'm working all day long, I don't feel any of that because I'm loving every single thing that I'm doing, working with students, training, doing the homework, doing the things necessary to be a good applicant for medical school. Those are the things that I enjoy, and that's what makes it a lot easier. And then the second point that I wanted to get to about that, as far as like just going every day, is also having future sight and understanding what that type of work ethic now will set you up for later in life. Because there will come a time that, I'm not a competitive professional martial artist anymore, and that role is gone, and I become just a coach, right? And I say just a coach loosely because just a coach means so much more than just being a coach. You're a mentor. You're somebody that is actively inspiring the next generation of competitors. So I say just a coach, but I don't really mean just a coach. It means a lot more than that. And then obviously one day, I'll be in the OR actually saving lives. And I know it's that sacrifice right now that's ultimately going to allow me to do that one day. And that's what inspires me to keep going. And that's the reason that I do what I do. Not only do I love the process, I love the grind, I love the journey. If you're going to be successful at anything, you got to love the process of getting there. Because if you don't love the process of getting there, the chances that you quit and you turn around before you ever get to that destination are way too high. You got to make sure you enjoy the journey. You got to make sure you enjoy the struggle. And when you genuinely enjoy the struggle and that journey and that work, that's how you know that that's your passion. People struggle to find their passion. Finding your passion is easy if you know what to look for. Don't look for the end result that's going to make you happiest, because there's a lot of end results that make people happy. Having a family makes people happy. Having money makes people happy. Being able to go on vacation and travel makes people happy. Being one of the best competitors of all time, or having this award or that honor or that degree, those things make people happy. But if you're fixated on only the end goal that's going to make you happy and you don't think about the journey that it takes to get there, you may realize that you hate the 10 years in between deciding that's what you want and actually getting it. And at that point, is it worth those 10 years being wasted for you to get that one thing? In my opinion, probably not. So you got to make sure that you are enjoying and loving every step of that process. I enjoy every single thing that I learn on the quest to becoming a doctor because I know that everything that I learned is one day going to make me a better physician. I want to know everything because I want to make sure that I can provide the best possible care to a patient. I want to continue to make myself a better martial artist because the better martial artist I can be and the more flaws that I can find and correct in my own game, the better that I'm going to be equipped to do that for all of my students, and identifying the things that they need to do better, identifying the things that they're going to need to be able to do, to be able to win and to be able to have success. And so that's my motivational speech for the podcast. That is the way that I balance my schedule. That is what my schedule is on a typical Monday. Obviously, that gets a little bit more complicated come Thursday or Friday when I'm flying to another country or to some other city on the other side of the United States to go compete in a karate tournament or teach a seminar. But again, those are the things that I love most. My favorite place to work is on a plane. I'm so productive on a plane. Like if you get me a window seat on Southwest Airlines where you don't have like the emergency exit row where they don't have that seat next to the window. So you got the window seat and there's not the seat in front of you if you've got the window seat on the left side of the plane in the emergency exit row. So you can just spread your legs out, right? I kick back. That's where I get my most work done. I've written entire final essays. I've written entire research papers on airplane Wi-Fi. It's just a great place to work. You're up there, you put some headphones in, and hopefully nobody's going to try to talk to you. You get, one of the flight attendants brings you, for me, I order a coffee or a hot tea or something like that to enjoy while I'm doing my work. That's where I enjoy doing my work most. And that is, like people say, like, oh, like you had to write an entire paper on the plane. That sucks. Like I would have wanted to sleep. If you spend your time wanting to sleep, you're not spending your time wanting to be successful. One of my favorite quotes is that the thing about dreams is that you can only have dreams when you're sleeping. Right? In order to have real goals, you got to wake up and actually go achieve them. That's the difference between a dream and a goal. You dream when you're asleep, when you're not working. A goal is something that you wake up, you actually go out there and you work for it to achieve it. And that's something that I live by. So once again, I'm getting back on my motivational soapbox. So we will make a hard shift and interrupt this with an advertisement for Century Signature Weapons. Century Signature Series weapons are endorsed by myself, Mackenzie Emery with the Kamas, and Danny Etkin with the nunchucks. Obviously, I have the bow staff series, as well as the Signature Series bow staff case and the trainer bow, which is a tool designed to help students become better with their bow staff strikes. Century Signature Weapons are top-of-the-line products manufactured by G-Force Weapons, one of the best manufacturers in the martial arts. So definitely going over to centurymartialarts.com, type in any of our names in the search bar. Once again, that's myself, Jackson Rudolph, Mackenzie Emery, or Danny Etkin. Type in one of those names in the search bar if you're looking for bow staff, Kamas, or chucks made to our professional competitive specifications. And so I apologize for making that hard shift out of the motivational thing. But that's one thing that I've learned from like teaching seminars is that if you get me off on like a motivational tangent and I can just keep talking about what I'm passionate about, I'll talk for hours. And I'm trying to keep this episode shorter. I know that the interview with Ross was obviously a longer episode. And when I started this podcast, I wanted to keep the episode shorter so it was a little bit easier to listen to. So we're going to try to shoot for under 30 minutes here today. So we're going to wrap up here by just saying, looking forward to the Irish Open. Now, Irish Open competition actually happens on Sunday, which is when I normally record this podcast for the upload on the following Monday. So I'm a little bit unsure about how scheduling for the next episode is going to work. I actually have a little bit of an idea where I might want to actually, for the next episode, interview a couple of individuals. I won't give any hints, but maybe not just one guest, but actually have a couple of guests on the podcast for the next episode. I got to talk to who I've got in mind about it. Maybe try to actually get that recorded in Ireland. And if I'm able to get that recorded in Ireland, then I'll have it uploaded on Monday. But we'll see. It's one of those things where we got to kind of see how the tournament goes and all that. You never know how busy it's going to be once you get there, and with teaching and juggling and everything else. I think that you guys can tell based on the schedule of just a normal Monday that I gave you, can imagine how much that intensifies when it's a tournament weekend, especially in a foreign country, teaching seminars, teaching private lessons, competing for Irish Open titles, supporting teammates when they're in the open weight final, things like that. So we'll see. My plan is to be able to get an episode out next Monday, but if not, then I'll make a post on the Facebook page to let you guys know about it. By the way, if you're somebody that always clicks the link or just goes on my YouTube channel or clicks the link from Instagram, one of my other social media outlets, please head on over. The Jax Rudolph Podcast actually has its own page over on Facebook. Go ahead and search the Jax Rudolph Podcast on Facebook. That's where all the big news updates about the podcast are going to be. And obviously, I share the podcast links to that Facebook page whenever the newest episode goes live. So be sure to go on over and check that out. As always, thank you all very much for the support. I love you all so much. I appreciate you all for listening. Thank you all for tuning in. And this has been another episode of the Jax Rudolph Podcast. I'll see you next time.